Welcome back, everyone, to the Jake Broe Show. Today, we are joined by Congressman Seth Moulton. He represents Massachusetts' 6th Congressional District. He is a former Marine Corps officer, and I believe he's been a member of Congress for just over 10 years now. Congressman Moulton, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Jake.
For my audience members who have never met you before, can you give a brief introduction, a little bit about your backstory, and what issues in Congress you're passionate about?
Sure. Well, I think the first question on many people's minds is, why are you doing this crazy job? Everyone hates Congress right now. Politics is so polarized. And for me, it's really not what I expected to do with my life. I'm here because of the time I spent in the Marines and the feeling that when I was on the ground in Iraq, I really saw some of the consequences of failed leadership here in Washington. Decisions made by politicians who had no idea what the troops were going through on the ground. So I served in the infantry, did 4 tours in Iraq as a Marine infantry officer, and really bring that experience as my sort of motivation for coming to Congress, to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen again. And so a lot of my work deals with national security issues. I'm on the House Armed Services Committee. I'm also quite passionate about transportation, and I do a lot of work on HighSpeed Rail. Not a lot to show for that yet in America, but we're working on it. And I also sit on the China Committee. I think the competition that we have with China and the threat of a war with China is one of the single most important issues that America faces today. So I don't know, is that a good background?
I would love to talk to you about the situation with China, but the primary focus of my YouTube channel the last 3 years has been the war in Ukraine. Yeah. So I do want to ask you, because in the last 3 years during this war, you have visited Ukraine. I just want to get your thoughts and your reactions. What was it like visiting the country at war? What did you learn, and what can you share with the audience?
You know, the first word that comes to mind when describing Ukraine in wartime is resilient. It's incredible how resilient the Ukrainians are. I mean, they are living under constant threat of being annihilated. You can't walk down the street in any city in Ukraine and not worry that you and your child is going to get blown up by the Russians. And yet, life carries on. They are fighting the fight. They are taking it to Russia. They are holding on when so many people said, look, if Russia actually invades, it's going to be over in 2 weeks. So the resilience of the Ukrainian people is truly inspiring. And it shows the power of freedom, the power of being able to choose your own government. And the fact that we can support them in doing that is incredibly important, not just for the future of Ukraine, not just for all the innocent lives that have been lost or could be lost if Russia is allowed to win this war, but because other countries around the world are watching this. Other democracies are watching to see if Ukraine will hold on. But perhaps even more importantly, great adversaries of the United States, like China, are seeing whether the West will stand up for democracies or whether we'll let authoritarian regimes just simply roll them over in the same way that Xi Jinping wants to roll over Taiwan.
The last 100 days have been a roller coaster ride, paying attention to the actions and thoughts of Donald Trump every day. Doesn't really make sense to me, but I just report what he says and does. But I want to get your thoughts. It feels like in the first 100 days, Donald Trump was trying to force Ukraine to capitulate into some kind of bad peace deal and to give favorable terms to the Russians just to get them to stop killing people. Trump even uses this language of, well, what is Russia giving up? Russia is giving up their aspirations for taking all of Ukraine, like that's some kind of compromise. But I want to get your genuine thoughts here. Was there ever anything Donald Trump could have done or said or offered Russia to get them to stop this war and to prevent future wars?
Well, of course, Trump came into office promising to end the war on day one. It's long past day one, and the war is still going on. But what's even more remarkable, as you said, Jake, is the degree to which he is, let's be clear, using Kremlin talking points. He is on Russia's side here. I've said this before. Donald Trump is a puppet of Vladimir Putin. He's doing exactly what he wants. He's carrying his water in the negotiations, in the weapons discussions. He'll cut off aid to Ukraine. He'll blame Zelensky for the invasion. I mean, absolutely preposterous things that are exactly what the Kremlin wants him to say. So it's actually extraordinary that a president of the United States is taking the side of a murderous dictator, an absolute war criminal, the biggest modern day world war criminal the world has ever seen. And that's who Donald Trump has sided with in this conflict.
It does feel like in the last week, things have mildly changed, and we're all subject to Donald Trump's moods, and he could abruptly turn again. But since this Vatican meeting with President Zelensky and Trump, there has been some changes. Donald Trump approved a $50 million sale of military equipment. There were the delivery of these decommissioned F-16s. We're hearing about this $300 million F-16 package that will include training for Ukrainian pilots. I saw an article saying that a Patriot battery system being decommissioned by Israel is going to get refurbished and then eventually sent to Ukraine. So, once again, this podcast could be outdated very soon if Donald Trump just chooses to change his mind. But is there a chance that I think the traditional national conservative Republicans, such as Lindsey Graham, can make a persuasive argument that Russia doesn't want to be our friend? Russia does not want to ally with us against China. That is insane. So as a member of Congress, Senator Lindsey Graham said that he's already spoken to and gotten 72 senators to agree to bone-crushing sanctions on Russia's energy and banking systems. I imagine Trump is going to try and sit on this for a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months. But is there a hope that a serious, tough bone sanctions package could be passed by Congress and then enforced by Donald Trump's administration?
I wouldn't put much hope in that, and I'll just be honest, because at every chance, Trump has eventually chosen Russia in this conflict. Whether it's with his words or his actions, sure. I mean, he's giving some F-16s to Ukraine for spare parts. He's giving a measly $50 million. I mean, this is nothing compared to what the Biden administration was doing. And interestingly, under the Biden administration, the critique that you consistently heard from Congress, especially sitting on the Armed Services Committee, especially from Republicans, but from Democrats as well, was the Biden administration has a plan to ensure Ukraine doesn't lose the war, but they don't really have a plan to win. And Mike Waltz and I sat together in these briefings, and I would hear him say, you need to have a plan to win. Suddenly, so many Republicans in Congress, including Lindsey Graham through some of his rhetoric, have just sided with Donald Trump on this. And no one is asking the administration, what is your plan for Ukraine to win? So let's go back to that discussion, because Ukraine needs to win this war. We cannot let Russia have a victory. We cannot allow Vladimir Putin to say, I can do this again. And next time it's going to be Eastern Europe, a NATO country, and U.S. troops are going to be involved. And we can't have Xi Jinping say, Vlad got away with it, so I'm going to try it myself.
Do you have any ideas you'd like to share about a potential plan to win? Working, let's say Donald Trump becomes receptive somehow. What would that look like?
Well, first of all, it's much more robust support for Ukraine and their progress. And to be honest, they're doing pretty well. Again, everyone thought they'd be done in 2 weeks. They've held on for a long time. They recently lost some territory in Russia. But if you actually look at the long-term trends, there's an argument that they're very much in Ukraine's favor. And that's despite the incredible negative pressure from this administration. So robust military support is, of course, essential. We also need to actually come to Ukraine's side in the negotiations. Almost all wars end in a negotiated settlement at some point. And so there will be a time when Russia and Ukraine have to sit down and sign some documents. But we want to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position to do so. Trump, of course, has been doing the opposite, literally undermining Ukraine's position, giving away things to Putin that Ukraine might want to bargain for. So there's a lot that we can do to just actually support Ukraine at a time when the administration seems to be doing everything they can to support Russia on the other side.
I have a lot of audience members watching us from Europe, and they're very concerned about Article 5 NATO protections. Mm-hmm. Does it still exist? So that's the question. If Russia were to attack or make a move on either Poland, the Baltics, Finland, wherever, Do you believe at this moment that Article 5 protection still holds?
I certainly do, and I believe there would be a lot of pressure on Donald Trump to uphold that agreement. But I'll also be honest. I mean, we do have a serial liar and convicted felon who's the president of the United States, and he's so incredibly selfish that he doesn't get why we have a military, why troops serve. Remember, he called volunteers for the military losers and those who got killed in conflict suckers. This is our president. And so he's not someone that any of us can really count on. And it doesn't make me proud to say that as an American, but I want to be honest with our European allies so they're ready for what might come next.
You did mention, I guess I have to use the term, former National Security Mike Waltz. Can I just get your thoughts and reactions on his dismissal? The administration is trying to sell it as a promotion to UN ambassador, but
yeah, promotion to a booby prize. Okay.
I just want to. If you're fired from one job, why would the Senate confirm? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too hard about all this. But you did personally know Mike Waltz. You worked with him on the Armed Services Committee, and based on his previous statements, I thought he was competent. I didn't have anything personal against him. Compared to some of the other actors in this White House, I viewed him as a rational, sane voice. So in the last 100 days, what happened? And obviously, Signal Gates, the Atlantic journalist being added. I don't believe that was the real reason why he was fired. But if you want to transition this question into your thoughts on Pete Hegseth, you can take this question any direction you want.
Mike Waltz got fired because he's competent. And this administration does not want competent people in national security. They seem to want people like Pete Hegseth, who is a human wrecking ball. He's brought nothing but chaos to the Department of Defense. He spends much more time defending himself than defending our troops or the United States of America. And that clearly is the model that Trump wants. He wants to surround himself with people who are total mess like himself. So Mike Waltz, the old Mike Waltz was very principled, someone that I worked with in a bipartisan fashion on a lot of different things. In fact, he and I did a long trip to the Western Pacific. We went to Guam and the Philippines and Taiwan to really understand that problem. We served together on some task force. I mean, he's someone that I really enjoyed working with in the Congress. And then a couple of years ago, he started just changing his views on things, clearly in an effort to cater to Trump. And he was successful enough that he got this job. But I think he didn't change himself enough to be a Trump sycophant. And so that's why the sort of deep state MAGA people have tried to get him out for a long time. Laura Loomer, this total lunatic conspiracy theorist who Trump trusts, came and gave the president a list of people to get fired. And it seems pretty obvious that Waltz was on that list. He wasn't fired right away. They waited a couple weeks, but now he's gone. And let's be clear, he has been fired. He's gotten a total booby prize. The Trump administration does not care at all about the United Nations. They completely disregard the organization. So Mike is out. And as a friend, as someone who knows him, I'm frankly disappointed. Like, if you're going to get fired on principle, like so many people have in the past under Trump, and go out with your head held high, standing up for the values that you embody with your long career of public service, both in the National Guard and in Washington. But instead, Mike seems to still just be following Trump around like a dog on a leash. And it's not going to look good for Mike in the long run.
What are your thoughts on the other, what I would call traditional conservatives just trying to survive in the party? People like Marco Rubio, who I guess is also now the national security advisor temporarily, but even retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, who was Mike Pence's national security advisor during Trump's first term. Do these people just view themselves as patriots and they're trying to survive within the administration to offer sane advice? And that's why they're going along with all this daily nonsense and madness? Like, to the average American, we just don't understand why are people still legitimizing Trump? Why are they still participating when he is deporting U.S. citizens? He's disappearing people to a gulag in El Salvador. Like,
he's fundamentally not upholding the Constitution. He's fundamentally not upholding the Constitution, and that's an oath.
What would it take for people like Rubio or Keith Kellogg, or I'm sure there's dozens of, you know, moral and decent people who are not insane, that are still just trying to legitimize this administration, thinking they can have a positive impact somewhere. What would it take for them to finally speak up?
Look, I don't know. I don't know what could possibly happen to get them to finally speak up, because so much has happened already and they've been complicit and silent. But I think, to get back to your question, Jake, it's an important question, which is, why are these people part of the administration to begin with? Some of them, I think, are power seekers. In the first Trump administration, there were a lot of people who felt it's my duty to the country to do the right thing, to serve the president, but to do so in a way that keeps the ship of state on track. And there were a lot of people who went into the first Trump administration and helped erect those guardrails. People like Secretary Jim Mattis, who has no regard for Trump. You can see he's very careful about what he says, but look at some of the dinner speeches he's given. He has no regard for the president. And I know personally he intervened several times to prevent complete calamities from transpiring based on things that the president wanted to do. And Mattis said, no, you're not going to get away with that. But I don't think there are people like that in the second Trump administration at all. Marco Rubio just goes along with everything. Remember when he was in that infamous Oval Office meeting with Zelensky, where they were just crushing our ally, and Marco Rubio was just slinking down into the couch like, I really, really don't want to be there? He was silent.
Trying to get out of the camera shot?
Trying to get out of the camera shot. He felt so uncomfortable for obvious reasons, right? And yet, I said to my team, I said, look, give this 2 hours. And sure enough, I actually had them go back and check. It was an hour and 45 minutes. An hour and 45 minutes after that meeting, Rubio put out a tweet spinning some crazy justification for the utter embarrassment that we just saw from the president of the United States. And so these guys just go along, and it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous.
One of my favorite observations after that disastrous Oval Office meeting was Senator Lindsey Graham going to the podium, and he's still wearing his blue and yellow tie. And he's screaming that, this is outrageous and offensive, and Zelensky has to resign now. And a month later,
Lindsey Graham is a total turncoat. And it's such a shame. He was good friends with John McCain. I was just speaking at the McCain Forum down in Arizona this past weekend. By the way, that's where the good Republicans have gone. There are places like that upholding the legacy of people like Senator McCain. A lot of people thought that Lindsey Graham was going to take up that mantle of leadership in the Senate, be that bipartisan voice for reason and principle to rise above the partisan fray. But he's just a stooge for Trump, like all the rest of the Republicans. They're just cowards. They know better. There might be a few actual real believers, but most of them know better, and they refuse to do anything about it. It's the opposite of leadership.
So this conversation we're having right now, this is part of the reason why Trump has been so successful. The fact that we focus on the opposition and what they're doing wrong. Trump floods the zone, and he's doing it with these AI-generated picks just to dominate the headlines, dominate the attention. But let's actually talk about what the Democrats want to do. So I would love to get your thoughts, and you can talk about any issue you want. Let's say we have free and fair elections in November of 2026, which has a lot of people nervous. But let's say Democrats sweep big, they take control of the Senate, let's say 51-49, they take control of the House, maybe they got a 20-seat majority. What would be their agenda? What would they immediately start doing to control or rein in or hold Trump accountable for all of his illegal acts?
Well, if we win the midterms, that means that we control the House. We probably don't control the Senate. So we're going to be able to block a lot of the Trump agenda, but we're not going to be able to do all that much going forward. And so what we really need to start talking about is what is this forward-looking agenda for Democrats? Not just how can we stop Trump? Yes, we can vote against things in the House of Representatives so they don't get through, but a lot of Americans don't want to go backwards under Donald Trump to this sort of mythical 1950s version of America that clearly doesn't exist anymore. But they also felt that a lot of Democrats were just preaching the status quo. Like all we need to do is get rid of Trumpism and we'll go back to the way things were and everything will be fine. And the reality is that a lot of Americans said things are not fine. And that's why they voted this crazy guy into office. And so I think Democrats need to offer a very forward-looking agenda that says, we're going to do better on all these things. Yes, Musk took a chainsaw to the federal government, but we're not going to recreate it just the way it was. We're going to make the government work better. We're going to integrate AI. We're going to have the best and the brightest come to work in Washington and serve you, the public, whether it's getting your Social Security check, whether it's doing environmental reviews more quickly so we can actually get infrastructure built. There's a lot of things that we could do better in government. We obviously need to fix the economy because prices are going up, wages are not going up. A lot of Americans are struggling to make ends meet. Let's have a forward-looking economic agenda that builds jobs rather than sending them overseas with this disastrous program of tariffs, that empowers American workers rather than empowering billionaires, that says to America, we want you all to be part of the success. And I think we also, as Democrats, have an opportunity to say, we welcome a lot of different views. We've become a very elite party that kind of looks down on people and says to people who don't agree with us on every little litmus test issue that not only are you wrong, but you're a bad person. We got to get rid of that and start saying, if you're an American, we want you in the Democratic Party. We're going to have a big tent. We're going to bring more people in. We're going to listen and learn from the people on the ground, not just stand here in Washington or at elite institutions and tell you the way things should be. One of the lessons I learned in the Marines was you got to go out and spend time on the ground with the troops. You know, go out to the line, not at 12 noon at lunchtime, but at 3 a.m. when it's hard to be out there standing watch. Understand what your Marines are doing, what they're facing day to day on the ground, and then you can be an effective leader. So there's a lot of opportunities in the next couple years for Democrats to really listen to America, to come up with exciting forward-looking plans to make America much better than it's ever been, and not just undo Trumpism, but actually build something better in its place.
For ordinary Americans watching this podcast, what advice would you give to them if they want to feel like they're doing something? They don't like the direction that Donald Trump is taking the country. What should people be doing now and today to help resist or help prepare for the 2026 midterms?
Well, first of all, I'd encourage you to go to my website, SethMoulton.com, because we're posting this stuff and updating it all the time on what you can do, how you can get involved in your local community to fight back against some of the things that Trump is doing. You know, he's attacking veterans. He's taking away our health care. He's taking away mental health services. So there are no organizations out there, nonprofits, that are doing the opposite. They're actually supporting veterans that you can support yourself. And then, of course, we want you to get involved politically because the midterms in 2026, they're going to make a big difference for how successful Trump is at ramming through this wrecking ball agenda for America. We want to win the midterms so that we can stop him, but also so that we can build for a better future. So go to SethMoulton.com, see the opportunities that are out there to do things today, but also to do things in the coming months to prepare for the elections. Because at the end of the day, the best thing we can do to solve this problem is to start winning elections. Democrats need to win, and I'm all about winning.
Part of Trump's flood the zone strategy is we're not talking about other issues that are not as exciting. So my final question for you is, what's an issue that maybe people haven't paid enough attention to, an issue that you care about or you've been working on recently? What is something that's not been focused on that people should really be paying more attention to?
You know, Jake, I mentioned this briefly earlier, but I'm the biggest champion in Congress of HighSpeed Rail. And a lot of Americans just don't know what we're missing by not being able to get on a train that goes 200 miles per hour downtown to downtown, completely safe, fast, nothing like getting stuffed in a pressurized aluminum tube 30,000 feet in the air and hoping a door doesn't blow out. Nothing like being stuck in traffic, but actually traveling the way the rest of the world does with no delays, on time. We can connect America and make it possible to live in your hometown community and still get a great job oftentimes in a city where a lot of these new jobs are, and still come home for dinner, to be able to have the freedom to look. You can still drive if you want. If you still want to fly, be my guest. But instead, if you want to, get from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, you can sit for 6 hours in traffic. You can fight through the airlines, or you can get there in a couple hours on high-speed rail. You can get from Dallas to Houston in 60 minutes. Imagine being able to just pop down to Houston for a game and back to Dallas. That's the future that awaits us if you bring some people to power in America who want to build our country, to make it better, not tear it apart.
Have you ever visited South Korea?
I have visited South Korea, yes.
I lived in South Korea for 6 years, and one of the first things that I experienced was riding on the KTX. That's their bullet train system.
Mm-hmm.
And South Korea doesn't connect to anything. Their land border is blocked by North Korea.
Right.
So their high-speed rail is entirely an internal system, but being able to go from my city that I was living in, Gwangju, to the capital city of Seoul, this is over 300 kilometers in like 2.5 hours. It was nothing with stops. And it was incredible. I share your passion for high-speed rail, and I'm mystified why the United States hasn't figured out what every other continent has figured out in the last 50 years. So, Congressman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll give the final word. I'll give you the final word to the audience.
Listen, I'm working to bring that future to you here in America, and part of that is also making sure that you're just safe and secure, and that's why we have to support Ukraine. Because the alternative, allowing Russia to run all over this democracy that's a close ally of the United States, just invites more war, more aggression, and ultimately could cost American lives. So I'm going to fight hard for Ukraine, but I'm also going to fight hard for your future. And that's why I'm proud to represent the American people in Congress.
Thank you again for your time. Take care, everyone.
All right, Jake. Have a good day.